ชุดนี้นะครับมีความยาวประมาณ1 ชั่วโมงครึ่งรวบรวมภาพในระหว่างที่คิมจองอึนผู้นำสูงสุดเดินทางจากเกาหลีเหนือด้วยรถไฟหุ้มเกราะส่วนตัวในช่วงตั้งแต่วันที่ 10 ถึง 19 กันยายนที่ผ่านมาซึ่งในครั้งนี้นอกเหนือจากการได้ไปพบปะหารือกับผู้นำรัสเซียแล้วคิมจองอึนยังได้ไปเยี่ยมชมเทคโนโลยีทางทหารของรัสเซียด้วยโดยเฉพาะโรงเก็บเครื่องบินแบบทิ้งระเบิดขีปนาวุธความเร็วเหนือเสียงและก็เรือรบชนิดต่างๆของรัสเซียด้วยซึ่งภารกิจการเดินทางไปที่รัสเซียในครั้งนี้ของผู้นำเกาหลีเหนือถูกจับตามองจากผู้นำหลายประเทศทั่วโลกเนื่องจากว่ามีโอกาสน้อยมากที่จะได้เห็นคิมจองอึนเดินทางไปออกนอกประเทศอย่างเป็นทางการแล้วก็ใช้เวลามากขนาดนี้แต่อีกด้านหนึ่งครับก็ทำให้หลายส่วนมีความกังวลใจเกี่ยวกับการทำข้อตกลงซื้อขายอาวุธอย่างเป็นทางการระหว่างเกาหลีเหนือกับรัสเซียในช่วงเวลานี้ที่รัสเซียยังคงทำสงครามแล้วก็มีการสู้รบอยู่ในพื้นที่ที่ยูเครนอยู่ณเวลานี้ด้วยนะครับ
ขอบคุณสำหรับการติดตามรับชมในทีเด็ดข่าวค่ำนะครับอย่าลืมครับถ้าหากว่าไม่อยากจะพลาดการติดตามกดไลค์กดแชร์กด Subscribe แล้วก็กดที่รูปกระดิ่งนะครับเพราะว่ายังมีคลิปที่น่าสนใจรอให้ติดตามอยู่ในข่าวทีเด็ดครับ
ล่าสุดเนี่ยเป็นกรณีความขัดแย้งรอบใหม่ระหว่างแคนาดากับอินเดียค่ะหลังจากที่มีเหตุการณ์สังหารผู้นำชาวซิกในแคนาดาไปเมื่อเดือนมิถุนายนที่ผ่านมานะคะแล้วก็ล่าสุดผู้นำของแคนาดาเองก็ออกมากล่าวหาว่าเป็นอินเดียนะคะที่อยู่เบื้องหลังในการก่อเหตุรอบสังหารครั้งนี้ปรากฏว่าล่าสุดนะคะมีรายงานบอกว่าทั้งหน่วยข่าวกรองของแคนาดาแล้วก็สหรัฐเองค่ะก็ออกมาประกาศว่าจะร่วมกันเดินหน้าสอบสวนในเรื่องนี้นะคะว่าสายลับของอินเดียเป็นผู้ที่อยู่เบื้องหลังการสังหารผู้นำชาวซิกในครั้งนี้หรือไม่ค่ะอีกหนึ่งความขัดแย้งที่เกิดขึ้นนะคะระหว่างอาเซอร์ไบจานกับอาร์เมเนียซึ่งเป็นพื้นที่ที่มีความขัดแย้งก็เป็นดินแดนพิพาทของทั้งสองประเทศล่าสุดยังมีเหตุการณ์ที่กองทัพของอาเซอร์ไบจานโจมตีเข้าไปในพื้นที่ซึ่งเป็นดินแดนพิพาทของทั้งสองประเทศค่ะมีรายงานผู้เสียชีวิตไปแล้ว5 คนบาดเจ็บอีกกว่า20 คนนะคะแต่ปรากฏว่าทั้ง2ประเทศเบื้องต้นมีการทำข้อตกลงหยุดยิงกันได้แล้วนะคะทางกระทรวงกลาโหมอาเซอร์ไบจานค่ะออกมาเปิดเผยคลิปวิดีโอนะคะเป็นภาพที่กองทัพ
As a rule, we see an interesting trend. All environmentalists are literally blown away as soon as we talk about the territory of Ukraine. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the official website of the Russian Foreign Ministry published material on the responsibility of the Kiev regime for environmental degradation in the region. The environmental crimes of the Ukrainian armed forces, sponsored by Western regimes. Since the outbreak of the conflict are numerous and very well documented, available evidence suggests that the Kiev regime, in its aggression against Crimea and Donbas since 2014, has used methods that have caused serious and lasting damage to the environment. Following the decision of the people of Crimea to reunify with Russia in 2014, Ukrainian authorities cut off the flow of water to the peninsula, flooding significant areas at the mouth of the Dnieper River. They caused critical damage to the Nizhnepetrovsky National Nature Reserve. At the same time, large areas of the Kherson region in Crimea were subject to severe drought. Moreover, the Kiev regime was proud of it. They did not consider it necessary to hide or explain it. It was a source of pride for them. For example, now there are numerous materials that call on people to either support the undermining and destruction of civilian infrastructure, in particular in Crimea. I mean what the Kiev regime and those under its control publish. Or they call to directly participate in the sabotage. They are proud of it. The Kiev regime is especially proud of how they skillfully encourage people to support extremist and terrorist acts. In the same way, since 2014, the same Zemlev and his terrorist organization were proud that they were able to talk on international platforms about the benefits of such extremist actions. For example, mining power lines that led to Crimea, or cutting off water. They gave entire presentations on the subject to the Council of Europe and in other hotbeds of democracy. Over the next 8 years, The war crimes of the Kiev regime against the breakaway Donetsk and Lugansk caused enormous damage to the ecosystems and biodiversity of a number of national parks, in particular the Askania Nova Biosphere Reserve. The destruction of civilian production facilities in the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics by the Ukrainian army caused large-scale pollution of water bodies, soil and air with hazardous chemicals. I would like to emphasize that since 2014, similar actions of the Kiev regime have been carried out in regions that, before being included in Russia as a result of referendums in 2022, were formerly considered part of Ukraine. These actions cannot be explained by anything other than complete indifference to the future of these places and direct hatred towards these people on national or ethnic grounds. Kiev's destruction of the Kakhovskaya hydroelectric power station dam in June 2023, which resulted in the largest environmental disaster on a regional scale and, I believe, on a global scale, stands apart in the long series of environmental crimes of the Kiev regime. An area of about 280,000 hectares was in the flood zone, which exceeds the area of some countries in the world, for example Luxembourg. The rapid flood caused mass death of representatives of flora and fauna in several nature reserves. In Nizhneprovsky, in Kamenskaya Sich, in the Great Meadow. Irreversible damage has been caused to flora and fauna objects listed in the Red Book of the Russian Federation, and to their habitat. Due to a sharp drop in water level, almost all the fish in the Kakhovka Reservoir, 43 species of fish, died. In the medium term, there is a risk of further degradation of ecosystems and desertification of the vast region in the lower reaches of the Dnieper due to the destruction of the central water reservoir that fed irrigation canals in this area. As a result of the Ukrainian attack on the dam, dangerous toxic substances and pollutants from sewer systems and other infrastructure facilities entered the Black Sea with water flows and had a negative impact on its ecosystems. In the flooded area there were about 23,000 residential buildings, 16 cemeteries, as well as 15 solid waste sites, including 3 landfills and 12 landfills. In addition, up to 350 tons of technical oil from the units of the Kakhovskaya HVP got into the water. As part of efforts to eliminate the consequences, Russian special services removed 18,000 cubic meters of garbage and restored telephone communications and power supplies. We carry out large-scale repair and restoration work. Carry out continuous sanitary and epidemiological monitoring of the state of the environment and preventive anti-epizootic measures. The exact extent of the damage remains to be determined. This will be done by scientists and ecologists. The corresponding work is currently significantly complicated by the ongoing hostilities. Against the backdrop of the disaster surrounding the destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power station, it is important to recall other environmental crimes of the Kiev regime in the Western countries that support it with weapons and that politically inspire it. The decisions of Britain and the United States to supply Kiev with depleted uranium ammunition led to dire long-term consequences for the region. As a result, water and soil over vast areas were exposed to radioactive contamination. I noticed that international and world experts are trying to get out of it by saying that these are not really nuclear safety issues. Of course, you don't even have to explain this. You just need to look at this problem not only from the point of view of physics, but also from the point of view of chemistry. There are no other options but to call it a global catastrophe. Data obtained from the use of such munitions by NATO troops in Yugoslavia and Iraq indicate that numerous cases of cancer and premature deaths should be expected in the affected areas, as well as long-term negative effects of radiation on the population and on flora and fauna. This relates to the fact that just the other day, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken again became concerned about food security. He said that without Ukrainian grain the world will not survive, but a number of European Union countries immediately said that they were no longer going to accept this grain. But the question is different. What will happen to the grain that will grow on lands that are contaminated by depleted uranium shells? For some reason, the U.S. State Department does not want to talk about this. Moreover, its representatives periodically declare and say that all this is not as dangerous as it seems at first glance. There is no need for a first glance here. There is data from scientists. Still, they did not completely abolish science in the USA, although there are attempts to do this. Money sometimes does things that you can only be amazed at. But this data cannot be cancelled. What will happen to the grain that grows from the soil? Contaminated by the United States and Britain? Where will it go? Will consumers, final recipients and intermediaries be able to identify it? Do they have enough capacity to conduct examinations of good grain and not so good grain? But neither Blinken, nor the U.S. State Department, nor these same American and EU monopolists in the field of agro-industrial trade operations are thinking about this now. They have no time for it. They now need to start lining their pockets again, as they have been doing all this time. They believe that this will not affect them. Well, of course, the consequence of Ukraine's use of indiscriminate weapons, in particular American cluster munitions, has been the large-scale destruction of ecosystems. Ukraine's massive use of obsolete sea mines has caused contamination of the vast Black Sea with hazardous substances. Drifting Ukrainian ammunition was found along the entire coastline of the western Black Sea, from Bulgaria to Turkey. The mentioned facts are recorded in detail by Russian law enforcement agencies and other competent agencies. We proceed from the fact that Ukraine and its accomplices among the states supplying the relevant weapons will be responsible for compensation for environmental damage and restoration of the environment in the former Ukrainian territories after the end of the conflict. For those in NATO countries who believe that this will not affect them, I will remind them of their own history, when they conducted experiments, for example, over Syria, Libya, and before that over Iraq. They believed that it was somewhere out there, that it was far away. Taxpayers of NATO countries, public organizations, and human rights organizations also believed that this was definitely not about them. Yes, it is possible that everything is not going so smoothly. It is possible that it is not very beautiful, but maybe it is quite normal. But the most important thing is that it is somewhere out there, that it is far away, that it is some kind of Arab world, the Middle East, it is somewhere closer to the Persian Gulf. But this is definitely not about the countries of Western Europe. Indeed, no one has cancelled geography. It's really far away. Only these countries came to the territory of Western Europe not through geography, but through migration. People from these countries came to the countries of the European Union. Today, as over the past 10 years, scientific conferences are held literally every month everywhere, in Italy, in Poland, in Greece, on how to prevent the flow of illegal migration from those countries where NATO conducted its experiments in regime change, in planting democracy, to interfere in internal affairs, because they want to. The same thing happened with Ukraine. Do you remember how much they teased Ukraine with the fact that literally very soon it would become a member of this very Western community? But there is literally little left for it to become a member of the European Union, and that just one of these days they will accept it into NATO. They almost even accepted it there. How did it end? How did this persecution, and it was the persecution of the Ukrainian people, end? Moral and political bullying. It ended with the fact that they really haven't included Ukraine anywhere yet. But people from there came and became part of the European Union, in fact, de facto. And now scientific conferences, roundtables, symposiums are being held. The purpose of which is to understand what to do with the citizens of Ukraine who came to these Western countries at the call of the West. And they are not going to leave from there. Moreover, they demand much more than the refugees from the Middle East before them demanded, due to the fact that they sacrificed their country for the sake of Western experiments. After all, The residents of most countries in the Middle East were not particularly happy about the experiments that were planned for them, and many of them simply resisted, as Syria did, but citizens of Ukraine, many of them, a significant part of them, believed in the wonderful future that they were promised, and they sacrificed their statehood, country and independence in order for them to come up with a beautiful, satisfying and cloudless life. And when this did not happen, they came to the EU countries on their own, with their own feet. And now with their own hands they are demanding much more than ordinary refugees. And there is another not very good news for the countries of the European Union. Ukrainians do not plan to leave.
I would add that at each of the previous 5 Security Council meetings in which President Zelensky was invited to participate, he spoke before Council members. I want to assure our Russian colleagues and everyone here that this is not a special operation by the Albanian presidency, but a continuation of a long and well-established practice of this Council, and today's speaking order therefore is in full conformity with the Council's guidelines and practices. As for the second question, I have a certain difficulty to understand what's the problem, because OSCE has an important role and is here because of its contribution to this meeting considered of essence. Yes, the OSCE representative here is an Albanian from North Macedonia, but if you would be more explicit what's the problem, I would be happy to help you.
With pleasure, Mr. President.
I would add that at each of the previous 5 Security Council meetings in which President Zelensky was invited to participate, he spoke before Council members. I want to assure our Russian colleagues and everyone here that this is not a special operation by the Albanian presidency, but a continuation of a long and well-established practice of this Council, and today's speaking order therefore is in full conformity with the Council's guidelines and practices. As for the second question, I have a certain difficulty to understand what's the problem, because OSCE has an important role and is here because of its contribution to this meeting considered of essence. Yes, the OSCE representative here is an Albanian from North Macedonia, but if you would be more explicit what's the problem, I would be happy to help you.
With pleasure, Mr. President. We do not believe that the arguments that you have advanced are compelling. There are a number of the members of the Security Council that will be represented in the hall today at the head of state level. You tried to explain why the Ukrainian president is being prioritized. However, the procedure, this has nothing to do with the procedure for the Security Council. You can understand the logic. When we discussed Somalia here, the president of Somalia spoke first here, but he was the only president from among those present. There are indeed precedents related to other files on the Security Council's agenda, but and a specific practice has unfolded linked to the specificities of certain regions, which has nothing to do with the situation in Ukraine. Ukraine, I would like to warn you that if today you bang the gavel thereby implementing your decision, the Albanian presidency will be tainted with an egregious precedent of violating existing practice in the Security Council, as established practice for the benefit of one delegation, which time after time continues to demonstrate with support from the West that their rules don't apply to it and everything is permissible. From the beginning, Western members of the Security Council 3 times pushed through the participation of Vladimir Zelensky in Security Council meetings through video link. This constitutes a blatant disregard for the authority of this key body. Other states find time in the schedule to travel in person to New York and to speak before the members of the Security Council. Over the course of the 75 years of the existence of the organization, the emergence and presence at the Security Council, speaking for the Council, was viewed to be a privilege. The same applies to statements from the lofty tribune of the General Assembly, instead of which, during the last session, during the special session, the representative of Kiev decided to speak through video link. At the same time, Western delegations alleged that last year Vladimir Zelensky was unable to leave the country due to extraordinary circumstances. These circumstances, nonetheless, did not prevent him from traveling to the U.S. to visit Washington, and yet he did not deign at the time to travel personally to the United Nations. Colleagues consider the violation of by the President of the practice of the work of the Security Council is fraught with risks of undermining the authority of the Security Council, which they are trying to transform into a one-man stand-up show. And for this, the Albanian presidency convened an open debate. In this debate, a large group of supporters from among NATO countries, and it's clear for many, at least for most, that today's meeting will be nothing more than a spectacle. I would like to stress for protocol and for those who are trying to distort our position, we do not object to the participation of the Ukrainian president in this meeting, but this needs to be done in line with the rules of procedure and existing practice, according to which countries invited under Rule 37 speak after the members of the Security Council, especially when, as both members of the Council and a number of other representatives under Rule 37 are represented at the head of state and government level. Turning to the participation of the Albanian foreign minister and of North Macedonia, apologizes the speaker, as a current chairperson in office of the OSCE. Our being appalled at this has nothing to do with his nationality, sir, and we objected to his presence in this capacity, and we informed the Albanian presidency about this yesterday. We fail to understand. As far as we understand, there has been no discussion of this or any open discussion of the building or in Vienna, the headquarters. There was no discussion. According to approved principles by the Permanent Council of the OSCE, any statements of chairperson in office, the Secretary General of the OSCE, or official representatives authorized by them need to be in line with their mandates, and they must not depart from the consensual position of the OSCE. If the Albanian presidency insists on allowing Mr. Osmani to speak during today's meeting, we believe that he can voice only the consensual position of this organization. I would note separately that the OSCE, due to the destructive approach adopted by Western delegations, has long not been in any way contributing to the process of resolving the Ukrainian crisis, but it has only been exacerbating the situation. We see this in attempts to advance and push through in a way that runs counter to practice. Mr. Osmani's participation by Western delegations, their attempt to advance one-sided rules of the game as part of the rules-based order. We urge members of the Security Council to adopt a principled position in this issue and to speak out against such approaches. We regret that the Albanian presidency has demonstrated blatant disregard for consensual and practices of the Security Council. They have placed their NATO political and ideological beliefs above the obligations of the President of the Security Council, which is a guardian for the procedures and should adopt an impartial position. Unfortunately, Albania has been unable to manage this today. Thank you.
I must say that coming from you, all this lecture of violating the rules in this building is quite an impressive shoot. But as far as you repeated many times that the violation here is about President Zelensky speaking before the Council members, there is a certain for this if you agree. You stop the war and President Zelensky will not take the floor. So what made him here important and what makes important for all of us to hear him first and then discuss is made from you, not from us. Thank you very much. I take notes and will continue with our session. You want the floor again? Okay.
Mr. President, I wish to draw your attention to the fact that you today are acting as President of the Security Council, not speaking in your national capacity as a representative of Albania. Your objective is to conduct a meeting as is enshrined in the rules of procedure of the Security Council instead of providing political assessments in your capacity as the President of the Security Council. Thank you.
I just responded to you after you addressing me as the Albanian Prime Minister and after you continuing to say incorrect things about what the procedure is here. If you don't want me to answer as an Albanian Prime Minister, don't provoke me as such. Anyhow, let's keep going now. The security again, okay?
Mr. President, I turn to you only as the President of the Security Council. Not once did I turn to you as the Prime Minister of Albania. Once again, I stress, I'm engaged in a procedural dialogue with you, not in a substantive dialogue. Please refrain from political assessments at the beginning of your statement at the Council.
Yeah, it was you that talked about NATO, about Albania being in NATO, about NATO countries coming here, so all this has nothing to do with my role as President of the Council. Anyhow, can we now, with your permission, continue normally the session? Thank you very much. The Security Council will now begin its consideration